No, don't touch that bottom window.
Okay.
You are live. It's 7 o'clock.
Yeah. Do I need to log back into Facebook?
No.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great evening. Welcome to the 1905 live stream this evening. I am going to take you through a little bit of the presentation tonight and share with you a little bit of information, hopefully answer any questions that you guys may have for me with respect to the 1905 project. And I am just checking all of our systems here, make sure everything is working as best as we can do. I'd hope to share some screenshots with you here tonight, but it doesn't look like that's working, so it won't work. The changing screen from 1 to 2.
Click on that.
Yep. 2, not working.
You're number 2.
Yes.
Number 2.
Oh, number 2. Okay, there we go. All right, we've got it figured out. All this is all so new. All right, so welcome to the 1905 committee. My name is Nadine Wellwood, and I am the chairman and spokesperson for the 1905 committee. And I want to share a little bit quickly about who we are, what we are, and then, of course, I also want to get your comments and questions. So please, by all means, do put them in the comments and we will get to those, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have for me. So the 1905 Committee is a grassroots organization. We are totally about fostering engagement, getting people involved in the political process from a perspective of policies and principles. And realistically, what we're trying to do is just increase participation in the political realm. Rooted in very common sense conservative principles, our mission obviously is guided towards conservative Albertans and giving them the tools and the knowledge necessary to navigate political decisions and make some improvements in their own personal lives through the political process. So it's about holding our government to account. So it is about leadership accountability, governance accountability, and whether you like it or not, unfortunately, we have to do that on both sides of the spectrum. It doesn't matter whether it's left, right, whether it's up, down, inside, or outside. Obviously, we need to be willing to call out our own when they get off track, if that's what we believe is necessary, and we need to stick to our principles. And of course, it's about those non-compromising principles. So in the 1905 committee, we came up with a name. I've said this a few times, and I just want to be able to share again quickly. The name actually came from, obviously, the year 1905 when Alberta became a province. And Alberta became a province in 1905, and people said, well, why would you want to go back to that? It's not about going back. It's actually about going forward. And because when we were talking about what we were going to call this committee, the name 1905 came up, and I said, what if we could do it all over again? What would it look like? How would we do things differently? And thus the name 1905 Committee was born. So the 1905 Committee itself, we have a number of different policies. We had to start with 5 different policies just to kind of kick us off and get us moving. And those policies, the first one obviously is immigration. This is a hot topic today. Alberta should basically be looking at making amendments to immigration so that we have greater control over the number of people and who are coming into our province is our position. And one of the things for me that I want to bring up is that currently Alberta, and Danielle Smith in particular, who's the leader of the UCP, has been pushing this Alberta is Calling campaign. She spent millions of dollars, in the tens of millions of dollars, to push the Alberta's Calling campaign, bring more people into the province. She's made comments like wanting to see 10 million people in Alberta by 2050. Another comment is she'd like to see the little city of Red Deer population almost 10 times to 1 million people by 2050. And that's created huge problems for our province. Obviously, affordability has become a major issue. Housing, just about everything has gone up. We have already strains on our education, already strains on our healthcare system. So it's just too many people too fast. And then, of course, we also want to make sure that the people are coming, obviously, we can employ and put to work and that are contributing to the province and not an additional strain on the province. So that's one policy that we focused on. The other one that we've focused on is a flat tax. And I'll bring that one up here for you as well. And on the flat tax, I'm going to bring this up a little bit here and switch that over. There's two things with a flat tax that I am particularly interested in. One, obviously, is we want to return the Alberta Advantage back to the people. And one of the things that when we did have the Alberta Advantage was a low taxation. We were one of the lowest taxes in all of Canada. That is no longer the case. We actually pay some of the highest taxes in Canada, despite whatever people want to say. The provincial income tax could actually, and Danielle Smith herself had made a promise to reduce the taxes and restore this Alberta tax advantage. One of the things it does, obviously, is it puts more money back into the genes of Albertans itself. But if we can remove the political favors, that's where my interest lies. And Milton Freeman actually spoke to this quite a bit when he presents about the flat tax, is if you can get rid of deductions and tax credits and subsidies and all these other political favors, which lobbyists, activists, special interest groups typically tend to go and lobby government for, then it actually levels the playing field, and you would actually find that people would actually be paying more of their fair share of taxes, because at 10% it's actually less cumbersome for you to just say, here's my 10% of the taxes that are owed on the income past a certain exemption that every household would be allowed, than it is to pay for the expense of lawyers and the expense of accountants and the expense of following all these lengthy regulations and rules. It would also reduce the size of government, because now you don't have all these people that you need to chase down, people who supposedly are avoiding taxes, and or people who have, government departments, en masse to accommodate. So there's a number of advantages, I think, in reducing the size of government, as well as putting more money back into the pockets, reducing cronyism, and reducing, obviously, political favor with the implementation of a flat tax. Now, all of these policies, we actually have petitions. So if you do happen to agree that immigration is an issue and a concern and we want to stop, I say, to people right now, Alberta is full. We're just full. We need to take a break. We need to catch up, allow the economy to catch up. If you agree with me on that, please come on to our website here, sign the petition, leave us a comment, tell us what policies that you agree with, rank them. This one is obviously my top priority, all the way through down 1 through 5, 1 through 6, 7, whatever it is that we have up here right now. And then, of course, I'll get into, that is our 2, and we will talk next about leadership accountability. And leadership accountability simply says this: if the government is going to make a promise, whether it be written or verbal, they actually have to follow through on that promise. Thank you, Wei J, for your comment, and for fighting and exposing all of this corruption. And I also have a thumbs up here from Jason Brown, so thanks again for that. Leadership accountability is a promise made must be a promise kept. There has to be accountability in the government. Milton Freeman, again, to use a quote from him, he wrote a book called Bright Promises, Dismal Performance. And I think that pretty much sums up our government. There's lots of promises, lots of pretty words that get spoken, just not a lot of follow through on action. And if you are going to make a promise, a campaign promise, then you have 24 months. If you have not fulfilled that promise within the 24-month period from the time that you were elected to having made that promise, then you must come back and explain as to why you have not fulfilled that promise. So whether that's a leadership review or a full-on review by the electorate, this can be applied to MLAs, it can be applied to the leader of a party, it can be applied to a premier, it doesn't matter, but it's about accountability. So if you're going to run for a position of office and you're going to run on promises that you have every intention of keeping when you start, then we expect you as an electorate to follow through on those promises. So leadership accountability, again, petition there if you want to sign up for that. Constitutional Convention. This is a method and a means that we as Albertans can actually use to lobby the federal government and use amongst other provinces as well to come together to make sure that Alberta actually gets equal representation and a fair deal in Confederation. So for so many people I know that have spoken with me, and Nadine, oh, I want to separate. Oh, Nadine, this is a waste of time. You know what? It's okay. I understand. But the reality is, let's work with what we've got. So these are the tools that we have. This is the means of working within the system that we currently have until it changes. And so one of the things that you can do to actually help foster that change is through constitutional convention, and that's pushing what Albertans truly want through policy, and push that through a constitutional convention to make sure that we are getting a fair deal with Canada, and working with our provincial, other provincial jurisdictions and other provincial premiers on what is best for each of the provinces. And Alberta's strong in and of itself, but if we can come together with Saskatchewan and BC and with Newfoundland and Labrador, for example, like we have with the carbon tax, and we push for constitutional reform, well, I think things like that will really make a big difference. Equalization is a big one. We are now beginning to see other provinces coming around to the fact that they understand that Alberta is truly misrepresented and is paying more than its fair share in way too many instances. And that needs to change. We need equal representation. We need an equal voice at the table. And you know what? It can't just be based upon votes. Alberta contributes a lot financially and economically to the country, and we're not represented accordingly. So that's another one that we have. Now, what I'm going to do, I'll talk to the last one that we have, and that is the Alberta Pension Plan. This one is, of course, near and dear to my heart as somebody who is a chartered investment manager, and I have traveled the province speaking to the benefits of an Alberta Pension Plan. The Alberta Pension Plan is probably one things that we could actually implement tomorrow that would benefit pretty much every Albertan, and for now, today, and in future generations. But also more important than that is the fact that we had about 62% of Albertans actually go to a referendum and state that they would like to see equalization ended. Now, equalization payments going to Canada is about $5 billion a year, roughly, okay? The Alberta Pension Plan, Alberta disproportionately contributes, after paying all that is necessary to fund our own seniors here in retirement, an additional $3 to $5 billion a year. That's an equalization payment to Canada. To the Canada Pension Plan. So, you know, this is one of those ones where Danielle Smith, in my opinion, should have actually just acted upon this and made it happen. And instead of doing that, what she did was she put Bill 2 into place, which forces the province now to have a referendum on the matter. Well, here's the thing. The Canada Pension Plan, Alberta has the right to leave anytime it chooses, as does any other province. And instead of just saying, hey, leave it alone, we're going to have a referendum, let people decide, which she could have done, should have done, and said she was going to do, she didn't just leave it at that. She actually put an additional obstacle in our path to doing that, forcing by legislation now that a referendum be had on this. So, you know, we have a conservative government today, but we haven't always had a conservative government. We just got rid of the NDP not that long ago. And now let's say we have an NDP government at some point in the future. You know, if this doesn't get implemented today and it falls onto somebody else to do, will it happen? Well, legislatively now, there's a referendum that would have to be required rather than leaving the power where it was vested, and that was with the province to make that decision. So, you know, I just question sometimes the judgment as to why things were done the way that they were. I'm also here going to talk a little bit about some of those poor judgment calls that we have called out at 1905 with respect to Danielle's leadership. Alison Redford, obviously former premier of the province, was basically told to leave and forced to leave by the party because Albertans were not happy with her performance. We'll just put it that way. She was involved with a number of scandals, especially around finance and the abuse of government assets. And she had applied to the Alberta Invest, a Crown corporation, and Danielle Smith appointed her as a director. Now, again, everybody in Danielle's mind deserves a second chance, apparently, unless you're Jennifer Johnson. And in this particular case, Alison Redford is not very well liked, especially amongst Albertans, and especially amongst Albertan conservatives for the scandals that she's well known for. And for Danielle Smith to say, hey, she deserves a second chance, well, I don't think that was necessarily her decision to make. I think this was a poor judgment call. And it really took people back to the days of the progressive conservative cronyism, which is what we actually voted out and which is actually why the NDP actually won the election in 2015 here. So, you know, I questioned her judgment on this. And, you know, again, if you agree that Alison Redford deserved a second chance, by all means, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I'm okay with that. But again, we have a poll that we did, and we found that the majority of Albertans did not agree with this decision. And we do obviously have a petition as well that just speaks to that. Albertans Heritage Trust Fund. The Albertan Heritage Trust Fund, this one frustrated me because it's in some ways very much connected to the Alberta Pension Plan. I do believe that Danielle has really boondoggled the Alberta Pension Plan. I do believe that there's federal politics involved with that, as well as other decisions that may have factored in. But the Albertans Heritage Trust Fund has been in many people's minds and opinions very much mismanaged. It's been abused by the premiers and government. It's under the government's control. And what Danielle has proposed to do here is to bring it under the premier's office. Now, you have to understand, when I was going around the province and talking to the Alberta Pension Plan, there was really two problems that really came to the forefront. The first one was the fact that people had this false sense of security around the Canada Pension Plan. And I think even as of recent, more of the information that's coming to light, even as of late, with respect to Chrystia Freeland and even now Mark Carney and Brookfield going after your Canada pension plans for their own personal purposes, for personal investments on a private corporation like Brookfield to the tune of about $36 million. That's where I get into the Alberta Heritage Trust Fund. Danielle, everybody's concern was the government would take this under their own wing. They would use it for their own pet projects. And Danielle then comes out a few months later and says she's going to take the Heritage Trust Fund and bring it under the Premier's office, basically confirming everyone's number one concern about the Alberta Pension Plan, because nobody understands the difference between the Heritage Trust Fund and how the Alberta Pension Plan would have been established. So there was a real mixture and confusion around who would do what. And unfortunately, what ended up happening was she just fed right into their fears. And so, you know, we have petitioned the government here, including the Heritage Trust Fund. It does not belong under the Premier's office. Unfortunately, I think that should have been set up extremely independent, much like a pension plan, independently managed and governed with its own set of rules and its own set of protections. This is Albertans' money. This is not money that belongs to the government per se. And when it comes to balancing budgets, even Danielle, who is supposed to be a libertarian, has been very much, you know, libertarian is about bigger government, or libertarian is about smaller government, very restricted in power. Sorry, there's some little comments popping up here. And what's ended up happening is she has the largest government now and the largest budget we've ever had. And so that is bothersome because that is the opposite of what we expected from her as a premier. So the 1905 committee is truly about a promise made must be a promise kept. This is not my first time saying that. It's actually not even the first time that you've heard this from the UCP. This is the UCP slogan, you know, a promise made must be a promise kept. And Jason Kenney started with that logo some time ago. And so I want to bring up some of the broken promises. Parental rights. So many people today thought that, hey, this issue was done, dealt with, you know, we're not going to be mutilating children. You know, children get to be children, and at the age of 18, if they choose to have a gender transition surgery, well, then that's a decision that at least are protected up until then. Parents have more say, more influence in their children's lives than government does. And people honestly believe that in January, when she had made that announcement, that this was a done deal. Well, the sad reality is she's done absolutely nothing with this. It hasn't even passed through first reading. Nobody's actually seen what's going to hit the legislature floor. So, you know, there's been indications about Rob Anderson, you know, when he was just after, I think a couple of weeks after this announcement had come out, said it would be in line with international standards. You know, what does that mean? Does that mean it changed from her announcement to something different? Like, we just don't know. So again, promises that have been made that just have not been kept. That issue in particular got her a standing ovation at the last AGM. And, you know, for nothing to have occurred on it. People say, oh, she just hasn't had enough time. That's not true. She's had more than enough time. It's just the lack of political will, in my opinion. She pushed the Sovereignty Act through in 30 days. So you can't tell me that you can't make legislation happen when you have the will to do so. Fair Deal panel, you know, she ran truly on the concept that there was going to be a focus. That was her mandate, was going to be fulfilling some of the issues in the Fair Deal panel, and we really haven't seen anything come from that either. You know, the promises around COVID, the promises that she made to the Coots individuals and the people who stood up for freedom when nobody else would and put their lives on the line are now sitting in jail and still looking at long jail time and sentences in prison. You know, she has abandoned that. You know, COVID investigations that she promised, apparently, you know, Dr. Gary, as she calls him, you know, has submitted a report, but yet we have not actually seen anything from that report. And it has been on her desk for a number of months. So AHS, she had promised big reform on AHS. Again, really no movement on that. College of Physicians and Surgeons, you know, she's really walked back from doing anything and addressing the issues there and those concerns. Taxes, obviously, she promised us tax reductions, and you know, it's looking like that's not going to happen at all. And then education vouchers. You know, this was one of my favorites that she had spoke to so many times. And again, this has been spoken about in a lot of different circles. And you know, right now the public system is given, you know, the lowest number I think I've heard is like $13,000 for each child to attend public school. Well, for those people who homeschool, for those people who send their kids to charter schools or private schools, you know, I homeschool my daughter. I get $900 a year. What are you expected to do with $900? But yet I pay the taxes, and you know, public schools receive $13,000. By doing an education voucher, you know, it allowed the money to follow the child. And so the parents, again, were able to, let's say we had 10 homeschool parents who got together, 10 children, and said, hey, we'll take our $10,000 each or $13,000 each or $7,000 each, pool those resources together. We can go borrow a facility, or, you know, rent a facility for that matter that's available during the day. There's lots of community centers and public spaces that are available, and we could hire a teacher. You know, is there anything wrong with that? You know, right now we're spending $8.6 billion to build more buildings. Okay, well, the buildings aren't the problem, right? And there are solutions that are far more, I think, quick to implement and just as effective, if not more effective, than building more buildings. And one of the things that I found very offensive about that announcement was Danielle said there was no money in the budget. There was no money left in the budget to do the promised tax cuts. But suddenly, just before a leadership review, she's able to find $8.6 billion for schools. Okay. So I'll just let you decide, you know, who she's pandering to there. Vaccines, obviously a big one, medical choice. Again, Alberta Bill of Rights has become a big issue now. And the Alberta Bill of Rights, I'm a strong advocate for, but the language needs to be right. We have to get this right. And this is a big thing. Her announcement she came out with the other day, I don't really see anything in there that we don't already have as far as rights go here in Alberta, whether it's gun ownership. We already have the right to own guns. Whether there's certain restrictions and kinds of guns and those things. It's all about the language. And that's what we need to see, which, of course, we're not going to see that until I think the 28th of October, she says, when legislature sits again. So, again, a lot of promises that are being made, and I hope that she follows through. But we need strong language, vaccines and medical choice. It's not only about making sure that we are protected from being forced or coerced into taking medical treatments that we disagree with, including vaccines. It's also ensuring that we cannot be punished. Because if you remember, Justin Trudeau has also said that, hey, he's never forced anybody to take a vaccine. And from that standpoint, he's right. He didn't go round us up and forcibly put a needle in our arm. He coerced us, absolutely. He pushed people to do it by threatening their jobs, their livelihood, being able to put food on their tables. And is that right or wrong? You know what? It's absolutely wrong. But here's the thing. He didn't technically force you. That's his argument. And now, so if Danielle is going to strengthen the Alberta Bill of Rights, then she has to make sure that we cannot be punished either for our medical choices that we choose to make. So I am, smaller government, less spending. Those are two big things. We already talked about them. We have the largest government we've ever had and the largest budget. In which case, that's not, in my opinion, the way that we as conservatives should be behaving. We should be reducing government size. Danielle had every opportunity to make government smaller, and instead she chose to make it larger. People say to me all the time, she is trying to, appease, the greater public. Well, you know what? I don't see the NDP trying to appease and govern for everybody. They govern for the people who voted for them and put them there. And I think realistically, Danielle, you have to realize too that the people who put you there, the people who keep you there, your base are your support. And you have to do what you say you were going to do. It's called integrity. One of the things 1905 has been very big on is principles. We want a principled government, one rule of law that applies to everybody equally. Sounds pretty self-explanatory, common sense, one rule of law that applies to everybody. No more, this law applies to this person, this group gets this special interest, this group gets this special privilege, this group gets this tax break. Why do we do this? One rule of law that applies to everybody equally, and that includes the political class. Politicians should not be above the law. Politicians break the law, and what do? They get a slap on the wrist, and then they get promoted off to some other cozy government or quasi-government position. You and I break the law, we go to jail. We get fined, we're punished. So, you know what? This is the kind of cronyism and the kind of political special interest that has to stop. We have to get back to, equal rights for everybody. The other one is speak the truth. So many people are frustrated with Danielle Smith and her net zero. The problem is, Danielle, is if you want to say nothing is one thing, but to propagate a lie, that is upsetting for a lot of people. So Alexander Schulzenson said in his book, Go Like Archipelago, do not participate in the lie. So how about we stop participating in the lie? Net zero don't belong in the same sentence. They don't belong in the same paragraph. In my opinion, at this stage, they don't belong on the same page. So there is more than enough science out there, just like the science right now about vaccines, which you still believe that the mRNA vaccine and the COVID shot is safe, and you still have it on the AHS website. You're still pushing it on the childhood vaccine schedule, all of these things, where so many other places now in the world are basically looking at this very skeptically and from a very scientific perspective, looking at the injury and the harms, which are undeniable. And you just want to, sweep this under the rug. Well, I'm here to tell you that your base is not going to sweep this under the rug. You have to address this. And that means you have to take an honest look at what's actually going on and look at the data. So, those are things. Integrity, do what you say you're going to do, is another principle. So that's a little bit about the 1905 committee, what we're doing, why we're doing. We're doing what is unpopular, and that's challenging a conservative government amongst conservatives. And I get it. People don't necessarily like to see our own challenge, but the reality is this is our window of opportunity to push to see real change happen. And if we don't put public pressure on our leadership, on our government to do something when they are in power, well, they are helpless to do something when they are not in power. Right? And then they make all these promises. We put them there and then they don't follow through. Well, it's time that they follow through on the promises that they made. And the only way they're going to do that is for people to actually get involved. Now, how do you get involved? I want to talk the last little bit here about this AGM that's coming up. We have the UCP is having an annual general meeting, and this year not only is an annual general meeting, but there will actually be a leadership review, an opportunity for you to vote whether or not you wish to commend Danielle Smith for the actions that she's taken, or if you wish to disapprove of what she's taken. So there will be a leadership review. That review is up to you as to how you vote. You need to assess what she's done, whether you agree with it, disagree with it, whether she's done enough. That is up to you as far as an individual goes. And the reality here, though, is this is your opportunity to form the policies that will be debated in the legislature for the next year. So Danielle Smith and the UCP government will actually take from this AGM those policies that are put forward that are important to its members, and that is what they will actually look to implement in the next year. So you, by being actively involved, getting out to the AGM, participating, having your voice heard, you're one of 3,000 to 4,000 people in a room. People think that their voice doesn't matter. Well, that's a very small group out of a very large number of Albertans. Your voice matters significantly by attending something like this. So you need to get involved. You cannot just leave this to other people to do for you. And the more you get involved, obviously, the more you learn, the more you realize that, hey, my voice does matter. And so that's what we're really pushing for people to come to the UCP AGM. Buy your ticket today. Go to the UCP AGM website. It's very easy. If you're not a member, become a member. It'll cost you $10. If you are a member, price is a little bit unaffordable or out of your range this year at the AGM, send me a note. Go to our website here at 1905committee.ca, click on the info, let us know that you might need a little help, or reach out to me directly, and we will help you whatever way we can to make sure that you get to the AGM this year and cast your ballot. You are the one who will help form the direction and policy here in the next, for the future, not only for you, but for your children. So I want to go through some of these comments, some of these questions. If you have a comment or a question now, please, by all means, do let me know. Tom, thank you. Kenny did something similar with provincial policing. He dragged it out, then found some Liberal mayor that said rural Albertans want to keep the RCMP, this while a rural crime wave was raging. Absolutely. And one of the things you have to realize is that the RCMP and the police don't actually work for us, the people. Their number one responsibility is to protect the government, actually. And so, you know, we do need, I think, an Alberta police force. This is part of the Fair Deal panel. Again, these were all proposals that were put forward and have been bashed around and banged around in Alberta for so long. It would be really nice to see somebody follow through on it. Nadine, run for premier. You're not the first person to say that, and thank you. God bless you. That's very sweet, but that is not my ambition. I think I'm actually far more effective right now on the outside of government than I could have been had I been elected as the MLA for Livingston McLeod. Unfortunately, that didn't work out as I planned. We have a selection process that keeps really good people, I think, out of the government, which is part of the problem. You know, we expected that Danielle would certainly stand up for the grassroots, and what we saw right from the get-go was she didn't reopen the nominations to allow some of the people who have been disqualified to run again, and we saw things like myself getting disqualified for differences of opinions, and I thought we were going to embrace the difference of opinions so we could have real debate on real issues. Barry, my issue is that government is not acting quickly enough. The House doesn't sit until October 28th. You're absolutely right. But the thing is, she has been Premier now for almost 2 years, and she's had plenty of time. Most governments and most people will tell you who are in government that if you're going to see bold action and you're going to see big changes made, those are made in the first 12 months. So what we see, unfortunately, my concern is what we got and what we will continue to get for the next 3 years past this leadership review, which is why we are putting so much pressure on this government right now, because we want to make sure that there are commitments. And if you're anything like me, you need a deadline. I want a timeline. It's not good enough just to make a promise, Danielle. You need to tell us when this promise is going to be fulfilled. Give us a drop dead date as to when we are going to actually see it happen. So that's one of the things people ask me all the time. They go, well, what could she do to kind of win over your favor and to make sure that you cast your vote in, for Danielle? Well, Danielle, I need to see a plan. I need to see dates, a timeline as to when you are going to keep your promises on taxes. When are you going to stop speaking to immigration? I know you've started to change your tune on that a little bit. Now you're pointing the finger at the Liberal government for immigration. But the reality is, you're the one who's made these comments about Alberta being a 10 million person province and Red Deer 1 million people in, by 2050. You were the one who implemented the Alberta is Calling campaign. We've had a lot of new immigrants that have come to the province. These people are not voting for conservative government. They're voting typically Liberal NDP. And so your comments about, you're going to change the political environment by increasing the number of people in the population just doesn't make any sense. It's never worked anywhere else in the world. I can't see why it would work here. Then again, some of your comments around net zero, as I've had conversations and your thoughts that you could redefine this word is just doesn't make any sense. So there are limitations as to what you can do, and redefining a global word like net zero to make it mean something other than what it's been defined as for the last 2-3 decades is naive. We have Vicky. I think their late entry back into legislation is by design. Kids are back in school in September. I would prefer, honestly, to see legislature happen a little sooner as well. But I get it too. MLAs, have to spend time away from their home. They're spending time up in Edmonton. I've been told since 2022, just wait until, it's just another wait until after the AGM. This is the problem. Promises made, but the promises just get dragged on and on and on. We don't actually see them get implemented. We need there to be more political will. Absolutely we do. And the only way that the political will is going to be there is actually to apply public pressure. I was on a podcast I've been on a couple this week, but one of the interesting ones, I went to do a little bit of research before I went on to a podcast with Sean Newman, and he had Danielle on just the week before. And one of the comments Danielle had actually said, she called it the Dinning approach. And she mentioned it with respect to, obviously, Jim Dinning and how the Canadian Taxpayer Federation used to actually call him out and hold him accountable, and how this was a good thing, this criticism. And I went, well, here you go. This is the 1905. We're not the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, a different organization, and it's Danielle Smith, not Jim Dinning. But here's the reality. She had even acknowledged herself, and to quote Jim Dinning was, if it wasn't for the CTF, he would have continued to move further to the left. It was only through their criticism and that kept pulling him back to the right. Why? Because that's what she was up against in legislature. Everybody wanted to continually go further to the left. So when people ask me why I'm being so tough on Danielle, it's because here's her opportunity. I don't think she's actually being surrounded by people who are giving her the honest truth. I think she's gotten some bad advice. I think she's made some bad judgment calls. And I think realistically, when you're surrounding yourself with people who go, yes, you're doing a great job, you'll get blindsided by the people who are unhappy. 1905 has called it all out. It's all right here where people are unhappy. You know, address the concerns. And if you can address those concerns, I think then you're going to have tremendous support. If you can't address those concerns, you can't even offer us a good logical reason as to why some of these delays. And when you go and you make decisions like, oh, we just suddenly found $8.6 billion to fund public schools, private schools, charter schools, but you couldn't reduce taxes for everybody to make life more affordable today when everybody could use that, yeah, you've got some explaining to do. Introducing rights legislation on October 28th. How long to third reading and passing by the Lieutenant Governor? That's the question. Again, that boils down to political will, whether or not she has the political will to push it through quickly, or whether or not this is something that's going to drag on. I'm really curious about the language. I think it's going to be completely watered down from what was submitted originally. And if there's going to be words in there like demonstrably necessary or reasonable, you know, who is it exactly that gets to determine what those words mean? The government. You know, she mentioned in her announcement about fair compensation and due process for property rights. Well, we already have fair compensation and due process, but the problem is it's the government that gets to decide what the fair compensation is, and they're the ones responsible for the due process. So, you know, are we, you know, I want to see language that strengthens and protects the individual's rights from the government itself and from government intrusion of those individual rights. So I'm very curious to see what happens there. Tom Smith is the same as Kenny. Strategy is slow walk. Almost everything to the status quo doesn't change for big business. Lots of distractions to keep you busy so you don't notice. There is definitely some distractions that are going on there for sure. Barrier for schools other than union self-preservation. What is the problem with the voucher system? There isn't. I think the voucher system is an excellent way to go. I wish she had just implemented this as well. Why do we need to build $8.6 billion? Why do we need to build more buildings? We don't need more buildings. We have lots of buildings. What we need is better education for our schools and more choice. And the education voucher system would provide parents with much more choice. Smith works for the establishment, not Albertans. It's all the policy for Bay Street and hot air for Main Street. You know, I don't know enough of the inner workings as to what's going on as far as the comments around Bay Street go. But, you know, the things that she should have done and could have done that would have benefited Albertans, I don't know why she removed the fuel tax only to put it back on again. And yet you've got Wab Canoe in Manitoba who removed it and has kept it off to make life more affordable and easier for all Albertans. Taxes, again, she made a promise and then reneged on it. If you take a look at some of the decisions that have been made, like she prioritized a high-speed rail between Calgary and Edmonton before considering a tax cut for Albertans. It's just things like this that, yeah, it makes me question the Alberta pension plan. You know, we don't need $1 from the federal government to implement our own Alberta pension plan. So this waiting for a number, I get people want to know what the number is, but will it change anything? Absolutely not. Albertans are just better off with their own Alberta pension plan and getting out of the Canada pension plan. The sooner the better. The longer we wait, the more risk we actually assume. I think maybe Danielle is getting resistance from her own cabinet. There is no doubt she's getting resistance, but when she's asked about that, she's told it's one big happy family and that everybody's doing good. Now, I've had people look at me and they say, well, she's playing the game. Well, do you consider your life and the life of your children and your children a game? I don't. And this is where I'm at. Enough is enough. I'm done. I don't want to play any more political games. This is not a game. My life is not a game for you to roll the dice on. I want influence on my own destiny. I want to be able to control and influence the life and the lifestyle of my children and my province. And you know what? Politicians just all too nonchalantly make decisions that impact us and without any consequences to them. And enough is enough. So, you know, is she getting resistance from her own cabinet? Well, you know what? She put them there. It was her decision to keep them there. It was her decision to keep the size of government the way that it was. It was her decision to expand it and to promote most of these people who, in my opinion, should have been asked to leave when Jason Kenney left. She then needs to learn some lessons on assertiveness. If she is strong, she doesn't need to worry about the bad players. You know, this is absolutely right. And it's not only assertiveness, it's conviction. You know, Vicki, I totally agree with you. Conviction, though, if you feel strongly about something, you know, and you truly, honestly believe in it, you are going to fight for it, right? And I just don't see that in her anymore. You know, in the leadership, I saw it more. And now that she's been in, I see more of a self-interest in self-preservation of staying in her position rather than doing the things that she said she was going to do. And to me, it's not only assertiveness, because if you can't be assertive if you don't actually have the conviction and the desire and the will to do it in the first place. And, you know, in some of the areas where I've seen her dig her heels in, like climate change and net zero, are the ones where I sit back and I go, why would you do that? You know your base doesn't support that. There's really no evidence to support that, but yet you dig your heels in and you continue to defend it. Again, around the vaccines, you know, her base is strongly opposed to this. And yet she continues to dig her heels in and tell people that the mRNA is safe. There is no evidence to indicate that it's safe. There's been no safety testing done on it. So to make a statement like that, people are catching on. They've become aware of what's going on. And so, you know, again, stop playing games, give people the truth, let them make informed decisions on their own. UCP is a big tent. It's just that they don't want good people inside the tent. It is a big tent. But you know what? I think it's a very divided tent personally, because we have you ever wondered why there's no Liberals provincially? We have the NDP and then we have the UCP. So we have, you know, the Socialists on one side and then the Conservatives on the other. But here's the reality. Where did all the Liberals really go? I think they're on both sides. They're on the NDP side and they side more with the Socialist NDP. So some of them park themselves over there. But there's plenty of them, I believe, in the UCP. Right? It's the United Conservative trying to bring the progressive conservative, which in my opinion doesn't exist. There's no such thing as progressive conservative. Like, oh, I'm fiscally responsible, but progressively I'm very socialist. And I'm like, excuse me? Like the two words should not be, again, it's like net zero, shouldn't be in the same sentence. So it is a big tent, but I think it's a tent divided. And I don't believe that you can really mend that, to be honest, because on the progressive side, you have people who are true blue. They are true conservatives. They want to look at true conservative values. They behave like conservatives. And then you have liberals in that tent as well that everybody seems to try to appease to keep them there. And that's where I honestly think there's some of the big issues around the UCP. Bonnie, the problem is that half of the caucus or more is still the old PC. See, here we go, right? We're pointing out the problem. It's the old progressive conservatives that are still there. And if the premier doesn't appease them somewhat, they can have an internal vote of non-confidence. Please do, because you know what? That calls them out. So, you know, Danielle, force them to call themselves out. You know what? These MLAs, if they do not have the support of their electorate, then they're not going to get voted back in. And we don't know who is the problem because you won't tell us. You know, you've mentioned a number of times that your wings are clipped. There's only so much you can do. But yet I have asked many times now, by whom? Who or what are the obstacles? Let us help you remove the obstacles. But there's silence. Oh, it's one big happy family. That's what we keep getting back from you. So when it comes to the pension plan, she needs to inform Albertans that she won't support an Alberta pension plan without grassroots signing in big numbers. When it comes to the pension, she needs to inform Albertans. She won't. You know, this is one where I think on the Alberta pension plan, she should have just did it. I mean, we had a referendum. 62% of Albertans actually agreed that we should stop equalization payments. The Alberta pension plan is a huge equalization payment that is going to Canadians, not to the benefit of Albertans. Let's just stop. Let's bring it home. We can do it better here. So that's my opinion on that. We as citizens need to get the bad MLAs out at the nomination level. But the problem here is, Bonnie, Danielle wouldn't allow some of those MLAs to be challenged. It was her choice to keep them there. And that is something that hangs on her shoulders as the leader You know, we can't always say that it's the citizens' fault. As you've seen also from people like myself, Tim Hoven, and others who've tried to get in, they control the selection process. And this is the problem. You know, I was nominated at Livingston McLeod only to be disqualified by the executive, having gone through the process, all of it from start to finish, and having the CA, the Constituency Association, and the people themselves, you know, push to have me as their elected representative, only to have a top-down decision made that says, sorry, we don't want you there. So there's bigger problems than just getting rid of the MLAs from voting them out. You've got to find a way to get good people in, I think, is one of the bigger issues. Vicki, at least if she's honest, then people will understand the urgency. I totally agree. Speak the truth. You know what? If there are obstacles in your path, speak to the real obstacles. If those obstacles are people, then share the names of those individuals. Call them out. Let, you know, people and groups like, you know, myself and others get to the bottom of it and help you remove the obstacles and move forward. You know, we need somebody who has a backbone, who has some courage, who's going to follow through and is not afraid of you know, the consequences. So right now, in order to see real change happen, unfortunately, you're going to have to push. And that push is not going to be easy. And Danielle backed down, you know, on the Coots issue. She backed down the minute things got tough. And I'm going, well, you know what? I want to know. She said her wings were clipped. I want to know who clipped your wings. Who in this province has more authority than the premier? And then people say, well, you still have to follow the rules. But when the law is acting unjustly against its own people, when the law itself has become the oppressor, who is responsible for correcting that? Somebody has to challenge it. And that's what I thought our premier was going to do. Smith barely won the leadership nomination. That's proof she doesn't have solid backing for her policies and she'd better listen or leave. I think Danielle has got a choice to make. Yes, she has to either listen to her base or she risks, you know, potentially losing that support. In reality, they are conservative progressives. And I am sad to say, but yes, I think there are many progressive conservatives, which I would call, you know, they might as well be the Liberal Party. And, you know, for the conservatives that, you know, believe that they're blue, you know, I think you're blue in name and conservative in name in many cases, and you belong probably more on the side of, well, we want big government because government is the answer to everything. And that's just not the conservative way. So the UCP wouldn't honor the primary of an MLA at the local level. And yeah, you're right. So if anybody has any other questions, I would love to answer them for you. You know, doing things like this, I think, are really important so that people understand what we're doing. There's a lot of misconceptions out there right now and a lot of rumors about the 1905, you know, the big one being, oh, we're looking to remove Danielle Smith. I do know there are groups out there actively doing that. There is no doubt about it. I do know that her support is not necessarily as strong as she thinks it is. Is the 1905 committee actively looking to remove Danielle Smith? No. We have not told a single person how to cast their ballot in the leadership review. That is your decision as an informed individual. I know there will be people on both sides who have supported the 1905 that will vote for, that will vote against. And you know what? That is your decision to make, not mine. So my job right now is to put tremendous political pressure to see change happen, to make sure that our government is acting in the best interest of Albertans and putting Alberta first. And I'm going to do that whether it's an NDP government or whether it's a Danielle Smith and a UCP government or if it's a UCP government under somebody else. The reality is people go, if not her, who? You know what? Let's, you know, deal with one problem at a time. I've never seen a lack of leadership or a lack of people stepping forward to lead this province should something inadvertent or you know, happen to Danielle Smith. I'm not placing my faith in leaders. I'm placing my faith in policies, which is why, again, the 1905 is so committed to pushing people to come out to vote on the policies at the AGM. Those policies are what going to help direct government and help direct the future of this province. And it's worth a day or two of your time to come out and to actually cast your ballot. Few more comments here. Mass immigration drives up stock market, middle class down, opportunities, wages, production costs down, consumer demand up, inflation. You're absolutely right. Affordability has become a huge, huge issue in this province, just like it is everywhere else. And productivity is a very quick fix to that. And unfortunately, we have a lot of resistance from the Confederation, from Canada, Quebec in particular, in preventing us from the development of our natural resources, which is keeping productivity low. And you're seeing that all over Canada. But it's one thing when, Confederation in Canada used to say, hey, you know what, give us your money, and they would take our money, but they stayed out of our way. Now they have their boot on our throat and basically trying to limit how much we can produce. And, a lot of the problems you're seeing with inflation and high costs and everything else directly related to immigration policies and bringing way more people in here than we could actually afford and than what the economy could keep up with. And productivity certainly could resolve a lot of that problem. We just don't, again, we're not seeing it happen for political reasons. Progressive Conservatives actually just a fiscally responsible liberal trying to get conservative votes. I would probably agree with that comment. Mass migration and uncontrolled unvetted immigration is pushing taxes way, way up. We won't feel this until tax time. Taxes, we are way overtaxed in this province. We're way overtaxed in this country. And taxes is something that we as an electorate are going to have to start pushing back on very, very hard. Because you know what? Why is it that the government has the right to take money out of your pocket to fund their own pet projects in many cases and social programs before you can afford to pay for your rent? You can afford to pay for your gas to get to and from work. You can afford to put food on the table. You can afford to pay for the electricity bill. That's about at least $60,000, $70,000 per household right now in this province. That money at least to that level where you can actually afford to pay for the necessities of life should be, in my opinion, non-taxable by the government. Anything above and beyond that should be a flat tax where everybody contributes, everybody pays. Get rid of the special interest, get rid of the special privilege that are offered to some at the expense of the many. So that's my comment on taxes. How could or will the Premier protect Alberta from a vaccine passport, digital ID? And did anyone watch the Omni-War Symposium this past Saturday? No, I did not watch the Omni-War Symposium this past Saturday. And how can she protect from vaccine passports? Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see what she's proposing. And a digital ID, CBDCs, I think, again, that's where if she wants to go down that path, I think she's going to risk losing the support of the base that's actually put her there. And so I think, again, Danielle, I think she's very clear, and I think she understands where people stand on these issues. And if she's going to keep pushing on them, I think she's going to get some feedback. Now, interestingly enough, on CBDCs, the Bank of Canada apparently has dropped their proposal on pushing forward on the central bank digital currency. So I did see announcements on that here in the last couple of weeks. So I thought that was rather interesting. People have caught on to the fact that that's not a very popular idea. Vicky, what do you envision for 1905? What direction do you want to head as an organization? I think the accountability right now and taking things one step at a time. Right now, we're very focused, obviously, on the UCP AGM, engaging people, getting them out, getting them interested, getting them involved in the political process is extremely important. That is our project right up until the AGM. And then I think when we see what the output of that AGM is going to be, I think will help us shape what our next campaign will actually be. So I think that's realistically the approach we're taking. It is very steady, stay focused on the goal and the objective right now to get as many people out to the UCP AGM, to get them to cast their ballots, help shape the future of this province, vote for the policies that you support and that you like and that you want to see implemented, and to vote down the ones that you don't. And then from there, let's take a hard look at what policies get pushed forward, what ones were strongly rejected. Let's take a look at where Danielle comes in on the leadership review to find out whether or not she has a 95% support or 65% support. I think that will have a huge difference and an impact on what we do and what I think Albertans and what the UCP actually chooses to do moving forward. Bonnie, we have a new party executive since you and Tim were DQ'd. I'm really glad to hear that. Let's hope that, again, there's changes, real change that actually comes. And real change is not about people, it is about policies, about principle, and then it's finding the right person to enact those principles and those policies. Leaders are going to come and go. People are going to come and go. It's perfectly okay. We acknowledge that. What we want to see are the principles and the policies live on beyond those individuals, and those are enshrouded and enshrined in things like Alberta Bill of Rights, and making sure that we get that right, and that, you know, individuals' rights are protected. You know, when we talk about what is the proper role of government, I mean, the number one role of government when it was established was acknowledging the fact that individual people have the right to life, liberty, and property. And what happens when the government is the one that actually oppresses life, liberty, or property upon their citizens, you know? So we've got to make sure that we get this Alberta Bill of Rights correct. And that's going to mean we've got to get some strong language and make sure that it's legal, but it's unambiguous. You know, it's very clear as to what the intent is, and it's very clear as to what the legal ramifications should somebody breach or violate those rights. So we are now at 8 o'clock. If anybody else has any other questions, please, by all means, let us know what to do. If you have not purchased your UCP AGM ticket yet, please do so. Go get your membership if you're not a member and you are a conservative. Please go buy your membership. Join us at the UCP AGM. If you feel like you can help, you want to make some phone calls, help us with the people on our list, encourage them to come out, you're more than welcome to come and help us do that. Donations, I know everybody is always asking for money. Find the one cause that you truly strongly believe in and, you know, help them out. You know, make a donation. If it's not the 1905, then someone else. But the reality is, you know, if you're not the one doing it yourself, find somebody who you support and just support them. So that's all of our questions that I can see here. I hope this was helpful for everybody in explaining a little bit more about what the 1905 is. We did do another live stream, I think it was a couple of weeks back. And a couple of weeks back, you can go onto my YouTube channel, Nadine Wellwood YouTube, and you'll find that there as well. That could probably help clarify. We did talk about some slightly different issues. I hope Jennifer Johnson today got put back into the UCP caucus. I'm not sure if her re-education training or not has been successful. The fact that, you know, we have a UCP government that expects now that every MLA has to be accepted by every group, and in particular, you know, a special interest group like, you know, the trans activists that we have, I find very disturbing and very upsetting. Voters need time to experience legislation in order to see the benefits prior to the next election. That's why we won't see the Alberta pension plan very implemented in this term, because there's just no way to prove to people anymore right now at this point that it would work. Thank you, Dennis, very much for your comments. Please send an email reminder about 3 hours before next one starts. Okay, fair enough. Good comment. A good job, Nadine. Thank you, Barry. Your support's always and encouragement is always welcome. Vicki, again, thanks for the time tonight. Vicki, is always a pleasure. You know, we need good people. We need people like yourself to keep doing what you're doing as well. So thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic evening. And should you have other questions, should you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And again, www.1905committee.ca for more information. Have a great night, everyone.